Just like the First Lady did really not need much of an introduction, our governor doesn't either. He's been a part of us and our political and public life in this state for many years now, and I'm proud to call him my friend going back, I guess, Governor, to the 1980s. Asa Hutchinson, raised on a farm near Gravette. He and Susan have been married for more than 40 years. They have 4 children. After graduating from law school at the University of Arkansas, Asa practiced law in Bentonville, and when he was just 31 years old, you may remember he became the youngest U.S. attorney in the country at that time. He's former chairman of the Republican Party of Arkansas, first elected to the United States Congress from the 3rd District in 1996. After being elected to a 3rd term, he was appointed by President George W. Bush in 2001 to head the Drug Enforcement Administration. In January 2003, he became the first Undersecretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Then he came home. He won his race in 2014. He was inaugurated as our governor in January 2015. And now the moment you've been waiting for, he's going to explain what's really going on right now in the Republican presidential race, along with what's going on in state government. Please welcome Governor Asa Hutchinson.
Thank you. And now it's my time to disappoint everyone who came here for a fount of wisdom. Some things in politics and life are inexplicable, and perhaps the presidential campaign fits in that category. But regardless, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk politics with you, to talk about Arkansas and our direction, and just to make some observations. Rex mentioned that I hail from Gravette, Arkansas. And so last night we were waiting for the returns to come in late. I was wanting to wrap it up. I was wanting to move on, but they didn't have all the returns in. I said, what's holding it up? And they said, well, Benton County is not in yet. And so I said, well, what's the problem in Benton County? And they say, Gravette hasn't turned their boxes in yet. Which reminded me of being on the election commission whenever I was chairman of the party in Benton County decades ago. I was on the election commission, and you know, we didn't have our boxes in. It was getting late. It was close to midnight, and I said, what's out there? And they said, well, Beatty Township does not have their box in yet. And Beatty is on the other side of Gravette, between Gravette and Oklahoma. So I called the precinct chairman. I said, where's your box? And he said, well, we just went on to bed. We'll bring it in the morning. We had to send the sheriff out there for it. So, you know, Gravette has its own way of doing things. But I'm delighted to be here, and Susan, the First Lady, is a good host for us here. Thank you for letting us use the mansion today. What a great venue for us. And I also wanted to introduce a new resident of Arkansas, a new part of my team, and that is Cindy Gillespie, the new head of Department of Human Services. Cindy, would you stand, please? Cindy's actually been written about in books. Mitt Romney, in describing the turnaround of the Salt Lake City Olympics, credits Cindy to much of that effort and the success there. She's gone on to be an expert in Medicaid policy, and a great leader, and I think she's going to do an incredible job for us here in Arkansas. But Cindy, I'm glad for you to be a part of the team. And so if you got any tough questions on the DHS, she's been here one day, so I'm sure she can answer all of those things. You know, it's nice to be here and talk about the election yesterday and recognize that I was not on the ballot. Now, that's literally true, I was not on the ballot, but perhaps figuratively, I was on the ballot in some races. And so in that context, I'm delighted to be able to talk about it. You know, if you look at the winners from yesterday, the big winner is the state of Arkansas. The big winner is our Arkansas primary that started on March 1 of this year. And whenever the legislature, speakers here, and senators that joined with me in moving that primary date from May to March 1 to join the SEC primary, there were many that offered great skepticism of that. Is that worth doing? We're not going to have any more. It's not going to be any different. and my goodness, it was. And what an experience for us to have 3, 4 of the presidential candidates coming in the last 48 hours because it was close here. The results reflected that it was close. It was a hard-fought campaign, and it's reflected in the turnout. 627,000 voters turned out in Arkansas yesterday, a record turnout. And that is good for the body politic. Democrats, Republicans, independents in this room, one of the things that we enjoy is participation. And yesterday, they participated. They came, young people for the first time in voting, people who hadn't voted before, thought it was useless, came out, and for whatever reason, they showed up at the polls, and that is good for the body politic. The exit polls showed an interesting fact. In Arkansas, 71% of the voters in the primary yesterday, 71% had not voted in the past 4 elections. That's extraordinary. And so, way to go, Donald Trump. and that's the reality. I mean, whatever you say about Donald Trump, he created interest, he created excitement in it. He knows how to do that. He entertained. He captivated or captured an emotion that was in the public that we had not seen before, and they turned out. We all worried about how that's going to impact all the races, but the races turned out okay. And that leads me to the second point, and that's sort of stating the obvious. It's been noted that we had some key races, particularly on the Senate side. There were 3 state Senate races that were in jeopardy, that the groups were going after them and targeting them because they voted to support a continuation of the private option to the end of this year and an end of the private option at that time, and creating the task force. They voted for that, which is what I asked them to do, which was a common sense solution to and a logical solution for us in Arkansas last year. But they were all paying a heavy political price and being attacked, along with a number of other legislative candidates, and heavy out-of-district money coming in to defeat them. And as you know, I put myself at risk. I held a news conference with them at my back, and I said the attacks are wrong, the attacks are misleading, they did what was right for our state. They're the kind of legislators that we need. I put my name with them. I campaigned for them, and the 3 key races all won: Eddie Joe Williams, Jane English, and Lance Eads. I think those are victories, not for me, but for the state of Arkansas and for those people who try to do the right thing as they see the right thing to do. Now, I say this also because the victory is for common sense in legislating. It is for doing what they see as the right thing. The victory is not about me, but I think everybody in this room knows that if those 3 state senators had lost their race, it would not be a pleasant day for me in this room. I would have to be explaining. And it would have been considered a referendum on me and my leadership. And so I am delighted with that victory. I'm delighted with the response of the voters to those candidates. But it was also about Jana De La Rosa up in Northwest Arkansas, who had a 3-way race in the primary, and she won by 60% of the vote, avoided a runoff, and she was being attacked on the same basis. James Sturch up in Northeast Arkansas won in a hotly contested race, but he won handily, and he was being attacked for the same reasons. And so I believe the winner yesterday was common sense legislation. It was about doing the right thing for your constituents as you see it and not being punished because of it, and being able to defend your position and win. And that leads me to the third winner yesterday, and that is Arkansas Works. Arkansas Works was on the ballot in the context of those who believed in providing common sense, practical solutions for Arkansas, for making good judgments and judgments that are good for their constituents, and standing up to those that are single issue or misconstrue the vote and misrepresent the vote. Legislators who work for those practical solutions can win in Arkansas. Common sense can prevail, and Arkansas Works got a boost of momentum because of those victories yesterday. Now, people say, well, you must know how they're going to vote, and the answer is, I never ask for their vote, but those candidates are common sense people, and I know that they will listen. And there's no guarantee that Arkansas Works will pass. It will continue to be a close vote because of the high margin that is required, but our chances increased because of the victory of those candidates that have voted for those common sense solutions that are good for Arkansas. The fourth observation I would make about yesterday's election, and by the way, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions, so you better be ready. But the fourth observation I would make is that, regrettably, a winner in yesterday's campaign was dark money. Dark money impacted 2 Supreme Court races. And if you look, and when I say dark money, it's that unregulated money that comes from out of state, that the donors are unbeknownst to anyone in Arkansas, that they influence a race here. In the real political world of governor's races and Senate races, we're used to dealing with that. We've got the capacity to respond, but in judicial races, it is much more difficult. And whether they were benefiting or being harmed by that dark money, most of our candidates repudiated that outside money coming in our judicial races. But because of what we saw in Arkansas and the influence of that money, the debate on how we should reform the election of our Supreme Court justices in Arkansas will continue. And as you know, I support reforming that, not at the district court level or even at the Court of Appeals level, but for our Supreme Court candidates, because they are statewide, they're restricted in the way that they are able to campaign, and we have such influence of out-of-state money. I do hope the legislature will bring that forth in the General Assembly next year to look at reform of how we elect or select our Supreme Court justices in Arkansas. Just another observations from yesterday is that the GOP had a good day. And I say that I had a call last night and some information from Clark County, Arkadelphia. Rex, your hometown. And it's different than when you were growing up there or went to school there. But Eddie Arnold called me, and he said that in 2008, they had 58% that voted in the Democratic primary, and they had 42% voted in the Republican primary. That was in 2008. 58% in the Democratic primary. Yesterday, they had it just reversed with 65% in the Republican primary and 35% of the Democratic primary. And so the shift has continued and solidified in yesterday's vote. A lot of it was just the excitement on the presidential side. Statewide, there were 400,000 that voted in the Republican primary, compared to 225,000 in 2008. And so a dramatic difference there in terms of a statewide turnout, a record turnout in the Republican primary. And so I think it's reflective of the excitement of the presidential campaign, but it's also reflective of the continued shift even at the state and local level. Now, it's not always true. I had one call in my office from someone in a rural county in Arkansas, and they left a message at the office and say, I did what the governor asked me to do. I went in to vote for Marco Rubio. And then I discovered I couldn't vote for the sheriff's candidates, and he was not a happy camper. But the shift is still there. The Democrats did have a good night in the context of the support that was reflected in Arkansas for Hillary Clinton. She had a good night. She won across the South, which strengthens her candidacy. And while we're still scrapping around, the picture is coming to a clearer focus on the Democrat side. And then finally, perhaps that gets me to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a winner yesterday. He had a good day across the country, winning in a variety of venues in states from the Northeast down to the South, particularly in states like Alabama with big margins. Only a couple of states did he get over the 40% margin. Others, he was still hovering between 30 and 40% level, but he had a very good night in terms of the collection of delegates. I do not believe he closed the deal yesterday, but he moved closer to closing the deal. So where does the Republican primary go from here? I think the challenge for Donald Trump and the test for him is that he has convinced those who are angry, those who are frustrated with the federal government, what's happening in Washington, that he is their candidate because he can express the same frustrations. And he has shown that he can captivate the media. He has demonstrated that he can generate the audiences. But what he has to do now is to convince mainstream Republicans, he has to convince America that he is capable of presidential leadership. And I believe that is the test, and he has an opportunity to do that. If he shifts his demeanor, if he shifts his structure, his comments, his discipline, so that he can come across and show that he can lead not just America, but that he can also lead the Republican Party, then you will see more of the establishment saying he will be an acceptable nominee. If he continues down a divisive path, then there'll be greater concern about the down-ticket races, governor races, and Senate races, and what's that going to do in impacting those candidates? Are we going to lose Senate seats? Are we going to lose gubernatorial seats in blue states that we have Republican governors now because of who leads the ticket? He's got to convince those skeptical that he can lead both the party and our nation. So we will see how that develops in coming days. Let me end before I turn it over for questions with just a conclusion. I hope people have learned something about my leadership, that I'm not hesitant to take a stand when I believe it is the right thing to do for our state and our country. I don't always win, but I'll express myself and I'll stand by those who need defending, particularly whenever they have stood with me. And so to me, that's what leadership's about. But I also hope that we can move from here into unifying, being together, and I think this body here illustrates it. That's what Political Animals is about, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, saying we care about our state. We care about the body politic and the success of our political institutions in America. And I'm convinced that even with divisive primaries, even with hard-fought primaries, we can learn from each other, we can come together. And so that's my goal. I've called a number of people. I'm going to continue to call them, congratulating them on their wins, congratulating them on the good race that they won, and wanting to work with them in terms of our legislative session. It is a joy of mine as governor to understand one fundamental principle. People ask me, what's been your experience as governor? And the experience I've been is that the people of Arkansas want their governor to succeed. Because when the governor succeeds, is successful, then our state moves forward in a positive direction. And I hope I always lead in a way that deserves that respect and deserves that support. Thank you very much.
All right, the governor will take some questions. Miss Annie will get the first one from the audience, but since we are a benevolent dictatorship, Governor, I will ask the first question, please. Put my old journalist hat on. If Donald Trump is the nominee, will you actively campaign for him in this state in the fall?
Well, no, he rephrased that question. He tightened up that question. I usually get asked, will you support him. I will support the nominee of the party. Now, he asked the question, will I actively support the nominee of the party? We'll see. I have a state to run, so we'll see the level of engagement. But no, I'm gonna work really hard to have the best nominee for our party in November, so we have the best chance of winning in November. I'm going to work hard to make sure we have that kind of nominee. As to what path that takes really remains to be seen between now and the convention, but I expect to be engaged in that, helping define the future direction of our party. When we select that nominee, I hope it's, I'm going to support the nominee of our party. Miss Annie.
Governor, before you were elected, we had a conversation about the legacy of governors, a book written by Bob, one of our Supreme Court. In this 1 year, how far along do you feel you are on your legacy for 4 years? The strengths and those that are the most challenging that lie ahead.
Well, you could define, I have a legacy for 1 year that I'm very proud of. It's incredible. The biggest legacy is I fulfilled the promises that I ran on. I did what I said, and that helps build confidence in our political life. Secondly, you look at the specifics, the coding initiative. Whenever I go down to Hamburg, Arkansas, and I see 40 students in Hamburg, Arkansas that have an opportunity to learn computer coding that they've never had before is extraordinary. When I see national recognition for Arkansas having the most innovative idea in education of all of the states because of our coding initiative, I am delighted with that legacy. Whenever I look at what we've accomplished in job creation, which I ran on, I am thrilled. On Election Day, Mike Preston and I, have you given up your hope for Florida candidates yet, Mike? Mike Preston and I on Election Day were in Fort Smith announcing a new company coming to Arkansas and creating 80 jobs, $80 million in investment, and hopefully there'll be expansion opportunities beyond that, taking over the old Mitsubishi facility there. That's what we're engaged on. That's part of the legacy. And then lowering the income tax rate in Arkansas. A $100 million tax cut that our economy has absorbed. And by the way, our revenue projections are coming out that shows our economy is still doing well. We're exceeding our projections. And so that kind of economic growth, those are things that are part of a one-year legacy. Over a longer period of time, absolutely, I want to strengthen that legacy, and I want to build on that. A lot of it's going to be defined this year, but I'm not in it far enough to talk about legacy too much.
And what is your challenge?
The challenge?
Yeah, that remains.
Well, the challenge this year is bringing people together in common sense solution for Medicaid reform and for our highway program. Big parts of our agenda, legislative session, so April's going to be consumed with that. Very optimistic about it. We've got some great leadership in the House and the Senate. We've got people who are very thoughtful, and we're going to find the right solution for Arkansas. And I think this last election gives us the opportunity and the window to do that.
Other questions?
Come on.
While you're thinking of your question, Governor, see, he gets another tough one from me. The special session now, given last night's results on the private option Arkansas Works, how smoothly do you now see that going? Where do you kind of outline what you see playing out?
Well, that's like me prognosticating on the presidential campaign. But, first, the process, the Healthcare Task Force is going to meet, I think it's March 7th, and they're going to have some discussions and votes on how we're going to achieve the savings that we need in the Medicaid budget. They're also going to pass over to the full session of the legislature the Arkansas Works Initiative. We're having it drawn up into legislative form. Of course, the fundamental principles of Arkansas Works is enhancing employer-based insurance as a viable option for those that are under 138% of the poverty level, making sure that we not just have a single-payer solution, but we have an opportunity for employer-based insurance to be, again, a part of the marketplace of insurance for those that are in the lower income category but are working. We want to incentivize work or really encourage work opportunities through more worker training of those that might be on the expanded Medicaid population, because the whole goal is to move them up the economic ladder. Personal responsibility with, if you're above the federal poverty level, having to pay a portion of the premium, similar to what you would do if you're on the exchange, and then to have more program integrity. Those are common sense changes that move this program forward to reflect Arkansas values. Are these cosmetic changes or substantial changes? Well, they have to have a waiver in order to achieve these changes, so that makes them substantial. And I think they're important changes. The private option ends at the end of this year. If we do nothing, then it ends. 250,000 people will no longer have the health care that's needed and that they've had access to. If we pass Arkansas Works, we have a plan for those that are utilizing the Medicaid expansion. We have enhancement of our work opportunities and values, and then we take a look at what changes in Washington next year as to what changes in policy, and then as a state, we can react to that and do the best thing for Arkansas next year as well. So that's the plan. That's going to be voted on in the special session at the very beginning of April.
One in the middle back here.
All right, we got in the middle and this side.
All right, go ahead over here.
Michael Johnson. Excuse me. Governor Hutchinson, according to your legacy, where would you say you are with your reentry that you have organized?
Great question, and that is so important to me. We had the Hope Summit that focused on two great needs of our state, and that is prison reentry program that you mentioned, and then secondly, help guiding those that are in foster care, making sure they have homes to go to, that they're properly cared for. Unique responsibilities of the state. Cindy Gillespie is going to be working particularly on the foster care side and the child welfare side. In terms of the prison reentry program, we did something unique. Instead of a $100 million prison, we lowered that amount to $50 million in prison expansion, and then we devoted money in prison reentry programs, in drug treatment courts, in alternative sentencing, and enhanced our parole officers for more accountability. That has been a successful initiative. First of all, our prison overcrowding went from a high of 2,400 backed up in our county jails down to 1,000. If you get it much lower than that, your county judges are going to be hollering because we need more people in our county jails because they like that reimbursement from the state. But it's at a level, so we've got that where it should be. In our prison reentry side of it, we have 130 prison reentry beds that have been implemented, which means that now you've got people being released from prison earlier than their parole eligibility date, going to a reentry center operated by a nonprofit that helps them get their driver's license, helps them to have the job training they need, helps them to have the counseling that they might need to re-enter the workforce. And so we have 130 beds for that. We need to get up to 500. Legislature's approved 500, but we're trying to do it right. We're trying to get it done well. And so it's a slower process than I anticipated. We've got more work to do. The nonprofits are engaging in it, but they it's a capital investment for them, even though they get reimbursement on a per inmate basis, but they still need the capital investment. And so we're making progress. We've got more to do, and the private sector partnership is a very important part of it.
Thank you very much.
Governor, back to another health care related issue, and that is the issue of education employees insurance. You know, over the last few years since the BB administration's reforms were enacted, education employees have been dealing with steadily increasing copays, deductibles, and premiums, and is credited by some of being a factor in which teachers are leaving the profession. What plans do you have to address this trend?
Oh, and you can follow up if I don't answer the question sufficiently or I didn't understand it completely. But this was the teacher's health insurance. And it was in financial distress. The premiums were going up at astronomical rates. They had a special session of the legislature. I think they might even had two special sessions, the Speaker says. One of them, we just poured in about $49 million, some extraordinary amount of money to prop it up, and it continued to flounder and to have excessive costs, and so they called another session to reform it. And they reformed it in a couple ways. And that probably is to your point, they adjusted the copays and they took on some, cost adjustments that put some burden on the teachers. But they also took away from the plan the non-teaching professionals, the janitors in the schools and the other personnel that are non-teaching. They took them off of the plan completely. And so those adjustments have made the plan stable, and so that's been the most important thing we've done. So it's been a success in terms of its adjustments. As we go forward, I think we do need to look at whether we've overcorrected and whether we can give some relief to the teachers. That's a fair question. So we need to look at it in that light, and it's worth another look. But let me add another point. And this is to those legislators that have a hesitancy about continuing the Medicaid expansion. As part of the legislative solution, we moved the personnel, the non-teaching personnel in our education system off of the teacher's health insurance. Where did they go? Many of them went on the private option. And so we're actually utilizing, from a government standpoint, for those making under 138% of the poverty level, and that could be a janitor in a school, it could be a bus driver, we're actually benefiting from that even as a state in terms of the non-teaching personnel in our schools. Is that a correct statement? All right. Next question.
Time for one or two more. One right over here.
Governor, I'd like to thank you. During the last health reform task force, you had addressed the disability waiting list that has 3,000 people on it. And you did commit to helping at least the first 125 and are committed to helping the rest. So I do want to thank you on behalf of all Arkansans with disabilities for that. Do you have any future plans for that population to help the remaining people be able to get the supports in their home instead of an institution?
Well, thank you for the question, and this is one of those challenges that must be addressed by our state. It's difficult to find the right answers because most of the solutions involve significant amounts of money. And right now we have, I think it's about 3,000 on the waiting list. Some of those have been on there for over a decade, and these are people who are waiting for home care. They are disabled, they're entitled to be paid and have their care covered in an institution, but they would like to have a home solution. And so which is actually a less expensive than the institution, but it still costs money. And it hasn't been addressed. And so I indicated that we needed to address it and start working down that list. It's going to be a slow progress. We can do more if we utilize some of the savings that can be realized from a managed care, that you maintain the quality of care, but you maintain some savings for the disability population. That's not counting the human development centers, but outside of that, that if you utilize some savings, that savings should go to reducing that waiting list. So that could really help us to make a jump and make more progress on that waiting list. That's one of the things that the legislative task force will be taking a look at this week.
Got one in the back. This will be the last one.
Last question in the back, or
Behind you there, yeah.
Dan is way back in the back is one I see way back there waving.
Thank you. Governor, recently the unemployment stats in Arkansas were released as being below 5%. However, the unemployment for the youth of the state, statewide, is in excess of 37%. There's been talk nationally about raising the minimum wage up to around $15 an hour, which may even make hiring youngsters with no experience more cost prohibitive. Would you be in favor of a split minimum wage for perhaps for the youth of our communities under 18 or under 21 years of age, where a business could hire youngsters at lower than the higher living wage that they're proposing?
Thank you, and I did support the last increase of the minimum wage in Arkansas. Historically, we adjust from time to time. I don't think it's time to adjust it again right now. And the youth unemployment is what you have to keep an eye on, as well as our small businesses. And if you increase it too high, too fast, then you're going to actually be requiring businesses to lay off people, to increase their efficiency, reduce their workforce. And so, I think you have to be careful about it. And then finally, just in terms of the unemployment rate as a whole, I'm delighted that we've created 38,000 jobs in Arkansas since I became governor. I can't take credit for all those 38,000 jobs. The economy just has an impact on it, but we're moving our economy in the right direction. And we've got to continue to recruit new jobs and new opportunities, because we have to remind ourselves it's a fluid economy that we have. We got a downturn in the energy sector. And so Southwest Energy lays off some employees. We bring in Sig Sauer Arms in Jacksonville to create more employment. We've got to continue to grow and create a diverse economy in this state so that there are those employment opportunities. Even though it's low, it's still a changing economy. And so yes, let's make sure that we raise the wage rate. The jobs that we created, AEDC Mike and Preston and his team, and the contracts that we've entered into for incentives, I think it's an average of $19 an hour of jobs that we've brought into the state. The jobs that we brought into Fort Smith the other day, $25 an hour. So let's don't satisfy ourselves with a minimum wage. Obviously, the young people need that, but let's grow that wage rate, and that's what we're trying to do. You all are a great audience. Thanks for your interest in Arkansas government. God bless you.
Thank you, Governor.